Thank you for coming. Sabrina Strong, she's one of our trial attorneys. She'll be talking. You will have seen her at the trial, at the trial desk. She'll give a statement, and then afterwards we'll take some questions. Would you give your name and media affiliation? Sabrina?
Good afternoon. I'd like to start out by saying we are disappointed and disagree with the judge's decision. We believe that it is flawed. We have sympathy for all who suffer from substance abuse. But Johnson & Johnson did not cause the opioid abuse crisis here in Oklahoma or anywhere in this country. We do not believe that the facts or the law supports the decision today. We have many strong grounds for appeal, and we intend to pursue those vigorously. The facts are that the company manufactured 2 FDA-approved medicines that are essential for treating patients who suffer from chronic, long-term, debilitating pain. And the evidence at trial showed that the company manufactured and marketed those medicines in compliance with strict regulations by the FDA and the DEA. The evidence at trial also showed that the company's medicines were rarely diverted, rarely abused, and they amounted to less than 1% of all opioid prescriptions prescribed to patients in Oklahoma. That's true throughout the country as well. And at trial, you will remember, there was not a single Oklahoma patient or family member who testified about abuse or misuse of any Johnson & Johnson medicine. And you'll remember that the state never called a single doctor, a single Oklahoma doctor, to testify that they were misled by anything that the company said or did. Today's decision reflects a radical departure from more than a century of case law in this state. For over 100 years, public nuisance law has been limited to property disputes, where one misuses their property and causes harm to another. That is not what this case is about. No Oklahoma court has ever done what this court has done today in applying public nuisance law to any commercial activity, let alone the highly regulated area of prescription medicines. The decision violates well-established constitutional principles, including due process of law. And at bottom, the decision is fundamentally unfair in that it finds Johnson & Johnson responsible for the entirety of the opioid abuse crisis and the greater drug problems in this state, while there was no evidence at trial to support that finding. We will be preparing our appellate papers promptly, and we look forward to presenting these issues to the Oklahoma Supreme Court.
Questions? Go ahead.
Sean Murphy with the AP. It seems like one of the arguments that the judge gave some credit to was the idea that the Johnson & Johnson subsidiaries provided the raw materials used by other manufacturers to make opioid drugs. Could you address that?
Yes, I think that's one of the examples of the problem with the decision that we see today. There's no basis, either factually or as a matter of law, for any liability associated with Johnson & Johnson's former subsidiaries who manufactured raw materials for opioid medications. The evidence is that those companies were one of many who manufactured raw materials for opioid medicines, and that every aspect of that business is highly regulated by the DEA and FDA. Every gram of raw material that is manufactured is done so pursuant to DEA quotas. Every manufacturer who buys raw material from those companies must do so consistent with quotas that they receive from the DEA. And there was no evidence at trial. The state did not put on any evidence that there was any wrongdoing by those companies.
In the back right there?
Yes, Ms. Strong, the defense said several times throughout the trial that obviously there were two other companies initially named that settled, and that Johnson & Johnson would never have brought this to trial if they didn't feel that they were right in doing what they were doing. Do you guys have any regrets at this point, knowing now that you're being ordered to pay more money than either of the other two companies settled for?
Listen, I think Larry Ottaway said it best in opening statement, and you just referenced it. When you're right, you fight. And that's precisely what you're seeing here. The company here made medicines that are essential for patients who suffer from debilitating harm. That's what they did. They did it responsibly. They did it carefully. If you were here and listened to the evidence of the trial and you listened to the people of the company who testified, you understand that this is a company that cares about patients, and that everything they did with respect to how they manufactured these drugs was responsible. In fact, you may recall the testimony about their medication that was introduced in 2011, a brand new molecule, something that had never been available to patients before, as a new, maybe better alternative for patients who suffer from harm. They didn't produce that medication onto the market until it was in a crush-resistant formula. That's a responsible company. That's who we want making these types of medications, responsible companies who are out there to try to help patients. And that's what we see in Johnson & Johnson.
Go ahead.
Jackie Fortier, NPR. What does this verdict do for public nuisance law in the United States?
Well, this is Oklahoma, and it's under state law in Oklahoma, and we think it's an absolute misapplication of Oklahoma law, and that will be something that will be raised in the appellate papers. I don't think it says anything about what will happen elsewhere in the country. I think it's an absolute outlier, and other courts have already rejected the theory in other jurisdictions, and we expect that this is something that will be addressed by the Court of Appeal.
Go ahead. Who are you?
Oh, sorry, Lenny Bernstein, Washington Post. On the abatement, are you reading that as an annual payment that the judge is assigning to Johnson & Johnson, or a one-shot deal?
We all just got the decision. My understanding from the comments on the bench is that is the amount that the judge has ordered, a singular amount, and that anything beyond that, I believe his statements were, that it would be left to the legislature. But as I said before, there's no basis for that one-time amount.
Go ahead.
Caroline Coulter, KGNU. If you lose at the state Supreme Court, will you take it to the federal level?
I'm really trying not to get ahead of things here, and our focus immediately will be on the appellate papers for the Oklahoma Supreme Court. But I think it's fair to say, as you heard me reference, there are some serious constitutional problems with the decision today, and we do believe that these are issues that will be of interest to the United States Supreme Court if necessary.
Adam Troxton on the transcript. This is not the only type of these lawsuits that Johnson & Johnson is involved in. Given the result of this case, do you foresee any change in tactics in other areas? The way that you attack this case, a similar case in a different state, is that going to change at all, or are you confident in the way it's handling it?
As I said, I believe this case is unique. We are here under Oklahoma law. The other cases that are pending and that are at the forefront are not in Oklahoma and will be litigated under different law with different circumstances. So, no, I don't believe that will change anything in that regard.
Go ahead.
You today still you're saying after the judgment that you do not believe Johnson & Johnson bears any responsibility. So who would you say is responsible? If it's not Johnson & Johnson, you don't believe the company has any responsibility whatsoever?
That's right. The Oklahoma and I think the nation's opioid abuse crisis is a serious public health issue. Nobody disputes that. But you can't sue your way out of the opioid abuse crisis. This is a problem that faces the country that must be addressed by public and private partnerships, by all stakeholders. Everyone must come together to address this. Litigation is not the answer, and as we saw at trial, Johnson & Johnson did not cause the opioid abuse crisis. The crisis, although it includes some diversion of prescription medications, it's largely driven by illegally manufactured drugs that are coming into the country from Mexico and elsewhere. These are problems that need to be addressed outside of the litigation context.
So you don't think that any of the drug companies are responsible?
Look, the defendants in this case are my clients, Johnson & Johnson and Janssen. That's what this case is about. And I think the evidence makes plain that my clients are not responsible and did not cause the opioid abuse crisis in this state.
I know that everybody's on deadline, so let's take two more. Go ahead, and could you identify yourself, please?
Stephanie Becker, CNN. This is a really emotional issue in Oklahoma. Do you think that might have had an effect on the judge's ruling?
Look, I think this is an emotional issue across the board. Substance abuse and the opioid abuse crisis is a major public health problem. But that doesn't change the facts of what we're dealing with here, which is the question is, did Johnson & Johnson cause the opioid crisis in Oklahoma? And the answer to that is plainly no.
Final question?
Chris Castillo with the Oklahoma. That's not really an argument you can make in the Supreme Court, though, right? I mean, you can't retry all these facts before them. So you're going to attack the public nuisance and First Amendment and what else, maybe?
I think there are going to be a lot of issues that we're going to see in the appellate papers that are going to be put together. They will include issues of law and issues of fact.
What are the constitutional issues?
There are many constitutional issues, including due process of law. The fact that Oklahoma has never utilized public nuisance law in this way before, that it has never been applied outside of the property context, that it has never been applied to commercial activity before, that is a fundamental due process concern. The fact that the judge believes that it's appropriate to hold a company who had less than 1% of the market responsible for the entirety of the opioid abuse crisis, including illicitly manufactured drugs imported into this country by drug traffickers, that's a fundamental due process problem, as just a couple examples.
Thank you, and we'll be around, so if there are other questions, there are a number of people here from Johnson & Johnson. Contact us. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.